welcome to the latest edition of Chrysalis on the Couch. With me today, I've got Kirsty Knight, Debbie Anderson, and Hanna Seely. And I'm Joanna Williams. I'm a tutor for Chrysalis for Year 1. If you'd like to like and subscribe our channel, you'll get notifications about future Chrysalis on the Couch and other content from Chrysalis. So, for today, we are going to chat about heroes and inspirations. So who and what has brought us to where we are, I suppose, and influenced us and inspired us along the way. And before we do that, I'd just like to go around and ask everybody that's joining me today to introduce themselves and tell me a little bit about yourselves. So if I can start with you, Debbie.
Oh, okay. My name's Debbie.
I always going to do that. Go for it.
Caught me on the hop. Yeah, I'm Debbie. I'm a Year 2 student at Chrysalis in the Chelmsford area in Essex. Just coming to the end of Year 2. We'll be starting Year 3 probably next March. At the end of Year 1, I decided that I would start with my hypnotherapy business anyway. So I started that last year, and I work from home with doing hypnotherapy. About me, I'm a grandmother. I'm 61. Got 2 grandchildren, one on the way, another one on the way. And I've had quite a varied work life, really. Started off working up in London for insurance, went on to advertising sales for newspapers, then ran a pub for a few years. But then about 31 years ago now, I joined the probation service and spent the last 30 years of my working life in various roles in the probation service, in the prisons, in courts, in hostels, and working in the community. And the last 18 years of my working career, I worked with victims of serious crime and murder and manslaughter. And and I think that really gave me the impetus to sort of do something about something I've thought about for many, many years, going into a counselling role. Because as you can tell, I've spent my whole life working with people, face to face with people.
Absolutely.
And I just thought, you know what, I really want to pursue this. And because my children are now offhand and everything, I had the ability financially and time-wise to take early retirement and pursue my dream of becoming a counsellor. So that's me.
Wow, Debbie, what experiences you've had, and I'm sure they'll, hold you in really good stead as well as a counsellor. Already you must find as a therapist that you bring so much valuable experience.
I mean, certainly, you know, what I've learned throughout my work, throughout my life, I mean, you know, with my life experiences as well, I think it has really, really helped me. And if nothing else, just to have the confidence to speak to all different people and, you know, try and build that rapport and so on. And I just love working with people. I find them fascinating.
Yeah, I can't imagine much that phases you, Debbie.
No, not really.
Excellent. That's always handy, isn't it? It's always a handy skill to have in counselling.
Yeah, I think I'm totally unshockable, to be honest. I really do. There's nothing that could shock me.
We'll try not to shock you today. That would be bad on Chrysalis on the Couch. We'll try and keep it low key. Brilliant, thank you. Hannah, tell us a bit about you.
Yeah, not probably quite as exciting as Deborah, but so I just coming to the end of the second year of the Chrysalis course as well. I think we're starting 3rd year in February, so that's all quite exciting. I'm 27. I recently got married in October, so the name change. I need to do that actually. I just realised on Zoom I need to change that now. But yeah, that was a bit crazy in terms of lockdown and everything, but we got there, so that was good. What else? I'm an English tutor by profession, but I started off training to become a lawyer. I did my law degree, decided it wasn't for me, which was quite a difficult decision. And then I went, actually, I quite like the idea of teaching. I've been doing that for about, being a TA and now a tutor for about 5 or 6 years. And during that time, I worked with a lot of students who needed emotional support, but my role didn't facilitate that. So I decided to, train as a counsellor, and I'm loving it so far. You learn a lot about yourself, definitely. So I'm finding it a really, really interesting experience.
And do you think is that what you'll do? You'll do counselling in schools, do you think, with kids?
Yeah, I like the idea of doing that. Yeah, definitely.
Isn't it funny how life takes you down these paths and you end up sort of where you're supposed to be? It's interesting.
Yeah. I did not expect to end up here, but I'm very glad I did.
No, congratulations on the wedding.
Thank you.
Quite a year to get married in, so you won't forget that one. Thank you, Kirsty. We've met before, but introduce yourself to Debbie and Hannah.
Yep, we have, as you say, Joanna. Well, my name's Kirsty Knight. I teach year 2 and year 3 for Chrysalis. I've been doing that for a couple of years now. I run my own private counselling and hypnotherapy practice in Grantham, and I also run a teaching collaboration as well, where we do mental health support teaching for both professionals and individuals. I'm ex-military, ex-Royal Navy, so but due to a car accident that ended shorter than it should have been. And then I just went into lots of different careers. I've worked in the power industry, I've worked in the building maintenance industry, I've worked in logistics, reached a fair level, shall we say, but it didn't hold any interest for me. It wasn't what I wanted to do. And then through various experiences, both sort of personal and friends and things like that, I decided that mental health support was where I wanted to be. And kind of similar to you, Deborah, I came to a crossroads where, okay, yeah, I can do this now. So what's stopping me? Oh, that would just be me. Well, let's not do that anymore. Let's go for what I wanted. So I did. I retrained, and here we are. And I think it's very true what they say: if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. So that's the way I see it. But this year has been tough, very, very tough for various reasons. I've worked all the way through lockdown. Had to do a lot of extra support for clients because they've needed the extra support. So hopefully, pretty much December, I've warned everybody, I'm not working. That will be a proper break and me time. So which is something we as therapists, we tend to forget. So just a little learning curve there, ladies. Sort of like self-care is very important.
I agree. Thank you. We're like the mechanics with the dodgy cars, aren't we? We don't always look under our own bonnet as much as we should. And, I think that's very true. And I was only saying to somebody this morning that I'm just exhausted, and I just can't wait a couple more weeks and then a proper break over the Christmas period, because it's slightly crazy. So thank you. Yep. I'm Joanna. I'm also a tutor for Chrysalis. I teach year 1 in Reading. I haven't been to Reading for a while, but that's where I am officially stationed when I'm not at home. I live in Farnham though, in Surrey, not too far away. I do other jobs as well. So I write. I also work for bereavement services organisations. So sadly, we've been very busy this year. And bereavement and employee assistance programs is what we do. And I also obviously teach for Chrysalis. I also run writing for wellbeing workshops, which bring the two strands of my work together, I suppose. And so I find, a bit like you said, Kirsty, that if you like your work, the trouble is you end up doing quite a lot of it and maybe not learning to say no to things or switch off. So that's the challenge, isn't it? Is going, well, it is still work, so I do need to sometimes take a break. So
and not feel guilty about it. That's the most important.
Yeah. And that's a real red flag for me. It's a sign for me if I'm feeling guilty at a weekend, for instance, because I'm not working. And then I think, it's okay. People have weekends. That's all right.
Yeah.
So, learning.
It's the laptop off at 9 o'clock.
Yeah. So, work in progress. We're all works in progress, aren't we? That's what I always say to my clients. So, it's true. I have private practice as well. Did I mention that? Anyway, I do about 7 different jobs. So there you go. And I'm a mum. That's probably all you need to know about me. Right, but what I'm interested in is who's inspired you along the way. This is what I thought would be really nice to talk about today, about our heroes, and have a really, hopefully, illuminating and positive conversation. So I think I'm going to go back round in reverse, if that's okay. So Kirsty, can you tell us about one of yours?
Well, one of mine, it was when you said about what the subject matter was, I thought, I could really go, I could go people like JFK and Nelson Mandela, because of very much human rights activists and things like that. And I did modern history at school, which was, for me, much more interesting than, the kings and queens of England that we've all done to. Yes. You know what I mean? So we had a chance at school to do modern history, so I did. So I learned a lot about the human rights movements and things like that from school. So I thought, well, I could go down that direction. But then I thought I wanted to go a bit closer to home. And the person that kept jumping into my head was my grandmother.
Oh.
My nan.
Yeah.
Now, my nan was probably one of the most militant people you could have ever met. But from the purpose of, she was always fighting for the underdog. She was always fighting. She worked for years for the Department of War and Pensions for the veterans. Right. And obviously me going into the military, that was absolute her I Ching as far as she was concerned. But she would have supported me no matter what I did. But early years, my nan lived with us, which was quite unusual, but my mum was quite poorly for most of her life. So my nan was the constant who always looked after me when mum was in hospital and things like that. Very, very strong woman, my nan. Both my grandmas were actually. There was no chance of me being shy and retiring with the strong women in my family. No, pink and fluffy and woolly. No, none of that. There was never any chance of that. But I know my nan wasn't the easiest woman to get along with, especially if you were a bloke. Because she didn't really like them that much. She wasn't crazy keen because she'd been hurt very badly as a youngster and things like that. But she'd always fight for the underdog. She would always fight injustice. She always wanted to make sure that people could have the best lives they could possibly have. Now, sometimes maybe her methodology wasn't the greatest, maybe just a little bit. But the heart was always in the right place. The reason was always in the right place. And when I was sitting here doing a bit of reflecting on this last night, I thought, yeah, because I have that in me. I can't stand bullying. I can't stand people being ridden roughshod over just because of maybe they haven't got as much money or influence or something like that as somebody else. And that really gets my craw up. That really does. And I know I've got that from her. Absolutely. You want an example of learned behavior, there it is.
Yeah,
clear as day. But again, I think I'm a little bit more tactful than she was. She was very black and white, and but she was always my biggest advocate as well. She was always my biggest support. Obviously my mum was as well, and dad was to a certain extent, but mum and dad split up when I was quite young, so I didn't really have that everyday support. Yeah. But from nan I did. And I think from that point of view, the bigger ones, the ones out, the worldwide ones, yes, but I think for me personally, it's got to be my nan, because she was very much teaching me right from wrong. Everybody should be treated the same. Everybody should have the same opportunities. You have the right to be heard. And, absolutely, if she was born a generation or two before, she would have absolutely been a suffragette.
Yeah.
As would I.
Yeah, as would we all, hopefully. Yeah.
Absolutely. But she would have definitely been one of the ones chaining herself to the barrow. I mean, it was all we could do when we lived in London for her not to march down to Maggie in Downing Street and knock on the door and have a barley with her, just, there's Nan, being carted off. Interesting.
She sounds amazing.
Sorry?
She sounds just amazing.
Oh, she was. I know she was a difficult woman with other people, but for me, as I say, she was her and my mum were always the biggest flag wavers for me, which was good. They empowered me to turn around and say, anything you want to do, you can. You just have to put your mind to it. But when mum wasn't there, she was the constant as well. And I think I learned a lot from, I also learned a lot from her as to maybe how not to do it. Because as I say, you know, sometimes she didn't go about it what you would class as the right way. But that's what life is, isn't it? It's a learning curve. So I think for me, one of my heroes has to be up there as my nan, and that's why.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's fantastic, Kirsty. Thanks for telling us about her. What happened to her?
Unfortunately, she died of lung cancer back in 1992. She was only 62.
Wow, very young, and she's been gone a while then.
Yeah, she's been gone a while, but she's always with me. I know she is. You know, in some of the things, as I'm getting older as well, I'm finding mannerisms and sayings are creeping in more. You know, as I edge towards 50 next year, I'm sort of like, oh yeah, oh that was nan. Ouch. You know,
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's weird when that happens, isn't it? But it's nice as well, because it means she's still with you.
Oh yeah, totally. And I know she always is, and that's not about belief system or anything. I just know. You know, I know that she'd have been proud no matter what. But now that I'm doing this job, helping more people, and you know, I think that would get her seal of approval as well, which would be nice. But yeah, we lost her very quickly. We found out in the October, and we lost her in the December.
Oh gosh.
So yeah, she was only young, but hey ho, that's unfortunately the way life goes. But yeah, but she was a force to be reckoned with.
Quite an influence. It's amazing. So
yeah,
brilliant. Thank you, Kirsty. That's a
all right.
fantastic story. I always love hearing about strong women. This is my bag. I love this.
Absolutely, I'm all for empowerment. I'm there.
All for it. Hanna, then what about you? Can you tell us about one of yours?
Yeah, there's a couple, and it's I was like, do I go with a personal one or not? I might link it to a personal one in a second, because Kirsty's just made me think of that connection. But Maya Angelou. So yeah, and she's been only a recent one, to be honest, in the past year or so, because how it came about was as I said, I teach English, so I was teaching one of her most famous poems, Still I Rise, and that is my favourite poem of all time now. So whenever I come to teach it, I'm super excited, and the students are a bit like, okay, like calm down. Yeah. But I'm like, you don't exactly, but it's like, wait till you know, hear about her as a person. And since then I'm getting through her whole collection of poems, which I love, and I write myself, so she's quite an inspiration to me in that sense. And she did so much in her life. She's definitely one of those people, if I could have met her, I would have given the chance. So yeah, depending on how much people know about her, I'll quickly summarize, if you like. She she lived in America. She started off from quite a poor sort of background. She had a quite sad upbringing, so she was sexually assaulted when she was younger. And it was I believe her stepdad was accused, and was like, so he was sentenced basically, or you know, the court sentenced him, and when he came out, within a few days he was killed because she spoke out about it. And she went mute for 5 years as a result. She was like, I'm not going to speak again, because that's what my words caused in her mind anyway. And that must take quite a lot of determination anyway, in a sense, and also shock, I suppose, to not want to speak. But she knew how powerful her words were. And then she went on to once she got her voice back, she went on to use it for so many different things. So she was in theatre and dance. Theatre is another thing I love as well. As I said, she was a writer. She wrote for a newspaper. She travelled the world. She learned 6 languages. She wrote 2 cookbooks. Like, she did everything. So some of the things I love, like languages, poetry, theatre, she did all of them. So it's just really fascinating to see how someone can accomplish so much, but at the same time she was just a lovely woman as well, from the interviews I've heard and the things I've read about her. So on a personal level as well, I think she's got a lot of strength, and that's something I really admire and would love to sort of emulate as well.
Yeah. Oh no, I think she's wonderful. Have you ever come
Yeah.
across her? So I teach, as one of my writing for wellbeing classes, I do an exercise on writing to your younger self, and I use her example. Have you read her letter to her 17-year-old self?
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing. If ever anybody watching, or if you guys ever get a chance to look it up, it always, I go back to it as a really, it's quite short, isn't it? But it's absolutely brilliant. Her letter to her 17-year-old self, because wasn't she was pregnant, wasn't she, at 17? She left home.
Yeah, I think it's 16 or 17. Yeah.
17 and left home to raise her son on her own. And she looks back and writes a letter to tell her 17-year-old self some good advice. But she's wonderful. Yeah. Oh, it's a good example. You said there was like a personal link as well, maybe.
Oh yeah, thank you for reminding me. Yeah, because weirdly enough, from quite a young age I liked writing stories, and then poetry was introduced to me at school, and I fell in love with that. Little did I know, my granddad has been writing poetry for years, until when was it? I think I was a teenager when I found out, and I was like, what? So he's currently working on publishing his own poetry book. He wants to collaborate with me at some point, which I'd love to do, because he's, I want to say 82 now, so and he's my last grandparent, and I'm like, yes, we will do this. And yeah, he's just such an inspiration, everything he's gone through, but that's a completely different person who I might get to later if we get time. But yeah.
Wow, what a fantastic idea. I hope you do get to do that project.
Yeah,
That's a wonderful thing to have. So great, thank you. And Debbie, what about yours?
Yeah, well, I don't think I can top the other two, really. It's really difficult when I started thinking about who's inspired me and who do I admire and who would be my heroes. Yes, I mean the people that spring to mind for me in terms of big figures that everybody knows, I think that the obvious one for me is Martin Luther King. The reason being, it's quite personal to me because I am mixed race, and my father's from Trinidad. He was born in Port of Spain, Trinidad, and he came over to this country in 1956 as a journalist. He had work to come to. He had a job in the Daily Mirror. And he came over to England in '56, and he had a choice at that time. He was champion athlete in Trinidad. He was the 400-meter hurdle champion, and when he was offered the opportunity to come to England to work, he also had an opportunity to go to America, to Atlanta, of all the places.
Wow.
Because he could have joined the Olympic team, and he had that choice to make at that time. And fortunately for me, otherwise I wouldn't be here, he chose England. He chose to come to England and work as a journalist. And at that time, my mum was also working in Fleet Street, and that's how they met and so on, so, but bearing in mind it was 1956 at that time. The stories that I've heard from my dad as to what he endured in terms of racism and bigotry and so on, and also what my mum endured, because my mum comes from a normal white background and so on, and she went through a lot. She went through an awful lot, and even within her own family. I think, in the early days, the only person that really supported her was my grandfather, who said, come on, bring him home, let's meet him, sort of thing. So there was a lot of difficulties there. So, because I have a mixed race background, and because I have, many relatives and friends, of another culture, and other countries, I think when I look at what Martin Luther King did and the like, others as well, he's just that figurehead, isn't he? That that means a lot to me. It means a lot to me, and we know that it still goes on now. You know, racism is everywhere, and I grew up being a victim of racism, because I grew up in Essex, and when I grew up and went to school in, you know, the sort of 60s, 70s, I can honestly say throughout my childhood, I cannot remember ever there being another child of colour throughout my childhood, you know, as I grew up. I probably didn't start meeting friends from another culture probably till I was in my mid-teens. All of my younger years, I was the only child of a mixed race background. I was the only child that I knew whose parents were divorced, because my mum and dad divorced when I was 7. It was difficult. It was difficult, and I had nothing like my ancestors and what they had to go through. It was absolutely nothing, not a patch. So that's a big one for me. And the other two more famous people, I suppose, that spring to mind for me is Oprah Winfrey and also Dolly Parton. And the reason I think of those two women is because they're both similar in that they both came from very poor backgrounds. They both suffered sexual abuse as young children, growing up from big families and whatever, had to, you know, make do and mend, as it were. They both, you know, had to struggle for money and whatever, and yet they both managed to pull themselves out of that. And they worked hard at whatever they did, and they have put their fame to good use as well through helping others. And they've made it, haven't they? They've made it through their resilience and their strength. And again, strong women, as you said, Joanna.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think in terms of inspiration, personally, for me, I would say that my children inspired me, because as soon as I became a mother at the age of 28, when I had my son, and then latterly at 35 I had my daughter, they gave me the strength to get through my personal battles and my personal challenges that I've had through my life. It wasn't easy. I brought them both up without their fathers in the picture. It was tough. But my children have and continue to give me the strength. They gave me the strength as I was bringing them up, but they still inspire me to do better and better. So that they have always been my inspiration, and they probably will continue to be. And then my grandchildren
too. I was going to say, I know you've got that joy as well of grandchildren.
Yeah. I mean, there's others. I could. Yeah, my mum, my grandmother. Oh God, she was just. We still talk about her now. We still, you know, talk about things she said and things she made us laugh with, and so on. And she was such a strong woman. Yeah. And but it's those people that are close, the people that keep you going. I think that's really true, isn't it? Certainly that inspire me.
I think it's nice as well, because if as you say, Deborah, you know, they come in, and I think it's probably our way of keeping them with us as well, isn't it? And keeping them relevant in our lives, even though they may not physically be there for some of us, you know. I think as you say, the little sayings that come in, and I always remember my nan saying, "A change is as good as a rest." Yeah. And I use that with my clients. Yeah. You know, and then I ask them, what would that look like to you? Yeah. So even though it's not, you know, it's not, I would say it's not a conscious decision. It's something that of hers I can bring into what I do, and I think that's lovely, because it's our way of just keeping them with us, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know?
And it's really interesting what you said about your schooling, because I went to school in London. So ever since I went to school, earliest memory, I had different ethnicity with friends. They were just my friends. That was who it was. My senior school, it was in Tulse Hill in London, which is just up the road from Brixton and Brixton Hill. So we had, you know, our school was mixed race. And for us growing up, that was just what it was. They were just the people. We almost didn't see the colour because we saw the person, but very much our schools were, that's how it is. You know, it doesn't matter what background.
Don't necessarily see colour, do they? They don't see different like that. It's what they're told.
Yeah, they learn
exactly.
It's their parents or their, you know, other friends or older people or whatever. That's where they learn it from. They don't learn it when they're children. And if that's how it is, that's how it is. It's others that bring those messages in and give those messages.
Yeah. I mean, my mum's third husband, he was extremely racist, and he didn't care who he hurt, and he tried to make me that way as well. Yeah, good luck with that. He tried to ban, when I had a birthday party for when I was about 10, he tried to ban my coloured friends from coming in the house because he was racist. And I basically, at 10 years old, turned around and said, you can do one, they're my friends and they're coming in. And that was it.
Well, that was your nan talking. You learned
that was my nan talking. Yeah, fair enough. You know, but my mum backed it up, obviously. But yeah, he tried, but I was like, no, they're my friends, and that's all you need to know. That is it. You know, so you're absolutely right. Kids don't, but what they're influenced by does, doesn't it?
Yeah, so around. I'm very aware of that. We're actually going a bit off piste here, aren't we? But that's why I like these chats. I'm quite aware of that living in Surrey. You know, it's very white where we are and very middle class and lovely and all of that. And I grew up, as you can probably tell from my accent, I grew up in the northwest of England. I grew up in Bolton, Milltown, but quite a large like Asian populations, quite a large Indian and Pakistani and Bangladeshi populations in that area. So although I went to Catholic school, so probably the school was a little bit white, but certainly, you know, generally a bit more sort of mixed in terms of the people you just came across day to day. Whereas here, I noticed that it is very unusual for my son to come across people of colour, actually. And when he was very young, he hadn't really. But I always remember his birthday party. I think it was his 4th birthday party. And it was one of those early birthday parties where you invite practically the whole class, you know, you just invite, it seems like hundreds of children, and you think, why have I done this to myself, you know? And it was in like a village hall, it was bonkers. We had somebody dressed up as Fireman Sam, the whole thing, bouncy castle, and it was really hectic. And he was talking to me about this child, and I'd said, oh, which one is, let's say the name was James, wasn't it? Which one is James? And he's like, you know, the one in the red t-shirt. And I'm like, oh, half of them have got red t-shirts. Oh, the one with, and he said about 3 or 4 things to sort of try and point this child out to me, and I couldn't see in the madness. And of course, when I realized which child he was talking about, this child was black, and he'd never said to me, he's the one with dark skin, or he's the one. It just wasn't there. And I was like, gosh, isn't that amazing and so great, and just proves the point that you're not born with those ideas, are you, at all? It's not. It is what gets put into your psyche. And I thought, well, there's a lesson for all of us, isn't it? That children, they, you know, they're genuinely not in that same place. Yeah. Why do we have to corrupt our children with the flipping world? It's not fair, is it? They're so lovely when they're little. Such a shame. You're like, just stay like this.
Shall we?
I know. Well, we've got to change the world. That's the thing.
Absolutely.
They'll do it. The kids, I keep saying to my partner, our kids will sort it out. They're good. They'll do better than us. Each generation, you hope, does a little bit better, don't you? So
one of my little sayings is, world domination is just around the corner.
soon. Yeah, same.
It'll come.
Well, I think like you, Debbie, as well. I think my son does inspire me. Actually, I mean, he's 10 now, and I can relate a bit to what you said around how they get you through those tough times. So I divorced from his dad when Gethin was really little. He was a baby, you know, and suddenly sort of left holding the baby, literally. And but you have to keep going, don't you? For them, they sort of get you through, and their attitude gets you through and inspires you. And sometimes if I'm not having a great day, certainly through lockdown, more often than not, he was the one who sort of lifted me a lot of the time. He's got a really wise little head on his shoulders, and he can really inspire me. And he's very driven as well. He's very ambitious and driven, and that kind of interests me in him. He's just got head boy at school, so he's delighted with that. I talk about world domination, Kirsty. My son is like, I'm going to be prime minister. I'll say, well, yeah, crack on. So,
get in on that bandwagon.
No, I'm a bit worried it's a bit too much. He wants to be a bit of a dictator, actually. I think he's got quite strong leadership skills, and I'm like,
yeah, but
so
with you coattails, he'll do it the right way.
Exactly. I'm always trying to just temper it and say, you've got to be, you've got to be kind as well as being a leader.
See, how old did you say he was now?
10.
Right, okay, so there's your answer. He's 10.
Boy, and he wants to be in charge.
That's good, lad. I like it.
But I think he's quite, I think he's not too bad. He knows, he seems to treat his friends quite nicely, so hopefully that'll continue. But yeah, so no, I was thinking about my heroes and stuff as well. And as you say, I'm glad you said that about children, because I think our children do that. And probably, I mean, again, there are loads of famous people like you, Hannah, I write, so lots of writers I could use. So many writers spring to mind, and people who've achieved, I'm always sort of in awe of people who achieve things in different fields as well. It's like people who achieve massive like sporting or physical feats, and I'm not a sporty person at all, but I always really look up to that. I'm really attracted to this, having a goal and really going for it and working hard and achieving something spectacular. That always kind of spurs me on, I think, to be better. I always think, well, what could I do a little bit more? How can I push myself a little bit more to achieve more? Because look what that person did, I find that quite awe-inspiring. I reread a book every year. This is a bit random. And I feel like I'm letting the sisterhood down a bit now, because I'm going to have a guy as one of my heroes, but that's okay, isn't it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, he's good. It's a really random one, but it's Philip Petit, the tightrope walker guy, who
the
high wire between the Twin Towers.
Yes, yeah.
His book, it's called To Reach the Clouds, and this came out before I know they made a documentary, and then they made a film a few years ago as well, a feature film as well, which, by the way, don't watch if you've got any kind of fear of heights, because it's
that I could have done without that. I could have done with the warning before I watched it.
Yeah, that was fairly like heart and loaf stuff, wasn't it? And
I learned to look away a lot.
Just incredible. But his book is wonderful. If you ever get a chance to read it, it's only a very slim book. And that's why we read it, because he's very poetic. He's very French. He's very sort of Gallic, and I don't know. He's just got this sort of charm. He's a bit of a flawed character, it's fair to say. He's probably not a very nice guy. He kind of lets people down quite a lot, by his own admission as well. So he's quite mixed in terms of being a bit of a flawed character. But I think you have to be a bit bonkers, don't you, to do something like that. He's just this kind of wild genius, and the way he writes is so beautiful, and everything about it. And I read it and I think it's such an audacious thing that he did, and that's what I admire. I admire somebody who is really bold and audacious and takes risks and is kind of just out there doing this thing that everyone else would say is impossible. And so it's not the fact that I want to get on a tightrope ever. I definitely don't literally look up to him in a literal sense, but it's that idea of something just really extraordinary and what a human can achieve when they just really want to do it. And it always reminds me of, who's the guy that did Everest, and they asked him why. Was it Hillary? And he said, because it's there. That's why we climb it, because it's there. And that's what Petit said about the Twin Towers. He said, when I see 2 oranges, I juggle. When I see 2 towers, I walk. And that was his immediate thought when he saw a picture of them being built. He was like, right, I need to get a wire between those towers and walk across it.
As you do.
So I really recommend you the book. I'd strongly recommend the documentary, the film, any of it. It just makes you go. I like things that make me go, because it makes me challenge myself. So yeah, somewhere between Philip Petit and my 10-year-old son is my heroes. So there you go. Hannah, you had 1 or 2 others. I think we've got a few more minutes. You were going to
well, I could talk a bit more about my granddad if you like, because he's quite an interesting background. It kind of ties in quite nicely with, I think, race and identity as well. If we want to go back to that. So he grew up in Iraq. He did not have the easiest upbringing. and then he managed to get a scholarship to come to England and study. So he worked in the oil industry in the end, but he came to England, went to Sheffield University, met my gran. They married very quickly, and she's had Irish background. She was from Ireland. They went to Iraq, back to Iraq. So you can imagine the culture shock she had, bless her. So they're both kind of inspirational to me. Of my granddad coming from Iraq to England, didn't speak much English at all. He was 16, 17 at the time, had never, barely knew anything about England, and he had to like just adapt to to this new way of being. And obviously culture, everything was different. And he was describing that to me very recently, because I've got to hear more stories from him, luckily, and that sounded absolutely amazing. But at the same time, I was like, you're so brave, because again, getting on an aeroplane was a whole new experience as well. And my gran, the same. She was very brave to go and have a different life with him in Iraq. And she stood out a bit, obviously, and she would ride a bicycle round the town, and that apparently was a scandalous thing to do for a woman. But again, she was challenging the stereotypes. So they both were quite unique in their own ways. And then they ended up coming back to live in England eventually. But yeah, I just find it crazy of how brave people can be, and kind of just throw themselves into these sort of completely different worlds or completely different situations. And I don't think he said anything really about the racism he encountered. Luckily, when he came to England, people were quite nice to him, so he didn't experience much of it. But I think it was just complete culture shock.
So young as well, and it does, I think, what all of these things do, and all the kind of heroes we've talked about, they make us challenge ourselves, don't we, and think, well, actually, they did something quite out there and quite brave. Like, what can I do that's a bit more? And I couldn't have been that at 17. That's astonishing, isn't it?
I know. It's funny, isn't it? Because I had some really good conversations with my nan about the world and things like that. And if you think about her parents, they went from horse and cart to walking on the moon.
Yeah.
So, technologically, we will never make those kind of leaps again, because now it's just a variation on a theme, isn't it? It's almost like a natural progression. But we often had deep and meaningful conversations while playing cards and things like that. And I said to her that I couldn't understand, if we're going on, if we're thinking about race and things like that, I couldn't understand people who were racist, and I still don't potentially understand it. I really don't, because people are people at the end of the day. Judge me, be judged on who I am, not what I look like. Yeah. But that's in an ideal world, we know that. But I often said to my nan, what was it about? How did it suddenly start to come up? Because you had organizations like the Black Shirts and things like that, and and obviously the world wars and all that stuff. And she said, I never forget, she said to me, she said, darling, you have to remember that we came from a time that a mixed marriage was a Protestant and Catholic.
Yeah.
She said it wasn't very common that people would, integrate the races and be married and all this sort of stuff. And that just didn't compute to me. I was just like, but I think on the backs of some of the people that we've said about, who we admire and everything, we now have the affability to make those different choices and to make the decisions based on, I like you as a person or I don't like you as a person. I think, I like to think that a majority see people as people and not, as I said, I'm not naive. I know that, unfortunately there are elements, but I think all the people, as we said, Martin Luther King, JFK, Mandela, Rosa Parks, just for sitting in a different part of the bus, something so small was a catalyst with Selma, and all those different things that build into what we have today and how we live today. And I think from my point of view is I work on the thing of we never waste the opportunities, because to me it's disrespectful of what people have been through and the genuine hardships, as you guys were saying, the genuine hardships of what they've lived through in the past. I think, you know, we need to strive to make sure that we, in our own way, in our own little, say the word bubble, but you know what I mean, in our own bubble, overused right now, but in our own bubble, we kind of make our own wave through of honouring what they've done before. Okay, sometimes we don't get it all right, you know, trial and error, but if you don't try, then you never know, do you? And I think that's probably one of the things that still drives me from all those people. And like Michelle Obama now, I mean, fantastic. I really wish she'd run for president, but she's absolutely kiboshed it. She won't do it. No. I think she is astounding, but she does it understated.
She's brilliant, isn't she?
But she's there driving it. She's there driving it. And even Obama, who was, you know, obviously he was the president, he was like, wouldn't be anything without that lady there, you know. But he had the you know, the tenacity to admit that, and I think that takes a lot.
Yeah, well, he's got a lot of grace, hasn't he?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, love him. Great, love her. She's brilliant. Love her book. If you haven't read it, get it. It's fantastic.
It's fabulous. Yeah, fabulous.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap us up, ladies. And I agree. I think we have a responsibility to everyone that's gone before and done all these amazing things. To do our best as well. And you brought me back to the suffragettes when you said that as well. I was thinking about how we must vote and things like that, because the people that have got us to this place, it's easy to forget, isn't it? Because we look still at what's wrong, don't we, with society, and think, oh, we've still got so far to go, but actually we have come a long way. And we do owe it to those heroes, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Thanks, guys. This has been really interesting today, and I could talk with you, but I have promised that I'll get you away on time, so we're going to wrap it up there. And I'll just do a last reminder to say that you can like and subscribe to this channel, and the next Chrysalis on the Couch will be on the intriguing subject of things we don't use. So tune in for that one. That'll be interesting. Thanks again, everybody. Really great to chat to you today, and I'll say bye for now. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.